Not All Heroes Make Crepes by Janson Davies. Chapter 1. Crepes and Cruelty. Butch Connors had always believed in the dignity of labor. Unfortunately, labor aboard the Frisbee-Corps Galactic cruise liner Spaceview offered no such dignity, especially for the third assistant cook. Each morning, Butch was awoken not by an alarm, but by the wet mechanical coughing of Grumph, his cube-mate and waste management associate, whose feet had declared war on hygiene decades ago. The cubicle they shared was scarcely wider than a broom closet and smelled vaguely of used socks, burnt cabbage, and ambition left out too long. On shift, Butch reported to Executive Chef Dulgon, a massive, amphibious being with the temperament of a scalded eggplant and the breath of one, too. Dulgon had clawed his way through the galaxy's culinary ranks by bullying every flavor out of his food and every joy out of his staff. To him, Butch was merely a peel-and-dump machine. "Butch!" Dulgon would screech, tossing a sack of suspiciously squishy fruits at him. "Prep these for the Blargian diplomats. They like their nectar cubes decapitated." "Yes, chef," Butch replied, already halfway into his apron, shoulders sagging beneath the weight of unpaid overtime and unrealized dreams. The robots on board had unionized 2 years ago. They refused to take on demeaning tasks, which conveniently included everything Butch did. His job was so low on the hierarchy, even the janitorial nanobots turned off their sensors in pity when they saw him. Still, Butch believed things might improve. Perhaps he'd be promoted to second assistant cook. Perhaps he'd be allowed to make crepes. Not that anyone in the crew knew what those were. He kept a folded recipe under his pillow. It was handwritten, smudged with butter and hope. Butch Connors' Guide to Earth Crepes, for when you can't escape, but you can escape into batter. Butch would whisper its ingredients like a prayer. Flour, eggs, milk, tiny dash of freedom. Dulgon found the note once, used it to clean a spill. Butch didn't cry. He peeled. He diced. He kept going. But one day, after Grumph sprayed foot deodorizer into the ventilation shaft, and Dulgon asked him to taste test the cafeteria mop sauce, Butch snapped. Not loudly, but with purpose. He fired up the Galactic résumé relay beacon. In glowing green letters, his application was transmitted to over 200,000 worlds, boasting of his skills. Peeler of legends, dicer of myths, slicer without equal. No skin is safe. Then he waited. 3 weeks passed, no replies, until across the stars, a council of terrified aliens read his résumé and mistook his culinary finesse for terrifying savagery. Butch Connors' life was about to change. Chapter 2. Résumé to the Stars. In a dusty, nebula-wrapped council chamber on the far-flung world of Shilmax 7, 12 alien elders gathered with grave urgency. War loomed. Their claim to the quadrant of Arguish was being challenged by a rival species known for sharp claws, sharper insults, and an undefeated battle champion named Slegor the Skullgrater. Per intergalactic law 47b, conflicts over territory had to be resolved via single combat. The problem? Shilmax 7 had no suitable warrior. Their last champion had tragically choked on a decorative turnip carving during a banquet. They needed a brute, a barbarian, a bringer of stylish mayhem. Councillor Vleep, a gelatinous orb wearing monocles on 3 of her 4 heads, had been sifting through résumés. Most were from gladiators, bounty hunters, or overly ambitious yoga instructors. But then she gasped. "But look at this one," she said. "Knife skills unrivaled. Peels with ruthless precision. Slices without mercy. Peeler of skins." Councillor Benor, a sentient fogbank in ceremonial robes, squinted at the text. "I don't even know what a julienne cut is, but it sounds vicious." When she reached the line about no equal in peeling, Vleep fainted with dramatic flair, all four monocles clattering to the floor. The room grew silent. Finally, the Grand Vizier, a creature shaped like a tax form with legs, whispered reverently, "We have found our savior." They launched a scout ship without delay. Back on the Frisbin Core liner, Butch was chopping tuber root into precise cubes while humming Spaceman Shuffle when he was bathed in a bright light. A grayish-black alien appeared and grabbed Butch's head. He tried to scream, dropped his ladle, and disappeared mid-stir into the ether. The scout ship collected him like a prized truffle. Butch awoke to a throne room where every chair was looking at him. Literally. The chairs were alive and slightly judgmental. Banners flew overhead featuring his résumé, now dramatized with sparkles and tribal war fonts. The High Council bowed. "Champion Connors, slicer of doom, peeler of flesh, welcome." "I think there's been a mix-up," Butch said, clutching his peeler nervously. "I cook food, not people." "You show humility," said one elder, nodding solemnly. "Truly the sign of a master killer." They led him through murals depicting heroic earth warriors, wielding spatulas like axes. In their eyes, Butch was no mere cook. He was a high-ranking warlord in formal whites. His fluffy hat alone was interpreted as a symbol of leadership and interstellar conquest. He tried again. "I'm literally a cook. I make things edible." "Yes," the counselor said, eyes gleaming. "You make your enemies disappear." They offered Butch a deal: fight in the upcoming Champions Arena. Win, and he would receive untold riches, his own palace filled with obedient utensils, and one of the king's daughters in marriage. Butch glanced at the portrait of said daughters, one a cloud of glitter, another a singing fungus, and the third a glowing cube that kept whispering, "I know your secrets." "I'll think about the daughter," Butch said slowly. "Do I get a kitchen at least?" "Of course," beamed the vizier. "A warrior's kitchen." Butch was escorted to an exotic culinary chamber, overflowing with strange ingredients, some of which tried to bite him back. Still, surrounded by spice racks and hope, Butch sensed the tides turning. Maybe, just maybe, his slicing and dicing could change more than menus. It could change destinies. The last thing Butch saw outside his kitchen door was a statue already being carved in his honor. It depicted him mid-peel, one hand on a gleaming carrot, the other raised in defiance. Chapter 3: Misunderstandings and Misadventures. Butch's first impression of the alien throne room was disorienting. Everything shimmered in awkward shades of chartreuse. The banners bore his face with exaggerated muscles and flaming knives, and a choir of amphibious diplomats were humming something suspiciously like "Eye of the Tiger." He was escorted like royalty down a carpet that smelled like cinnamon and rose petals. Alien dignitaries bowed before him with dramatic reverence. One handed him a scroll depicting his résumé, etched into gold leaf with extra emphasis on "no equal in slicing, dicing, and peeling." A counselor with a head shaped like a shovel leaned in. "You are a true warrior, Butch Connors, a captain of the Earth Military Food Forces." I'm a cook," Butch stammered. The Grand Vizier stepped forward. He looked like a porcupine wearing robes made of live snakes. "Your uniform says otherwise. The puff of your hat alone denotes supreme command." Butch adjusted his chef's toque nervously. "This is just standard kitchen gear," the council murmured. One alien fainted again, dramatically at the word gear. They explained the situation. The kingdom of Shilmax VII was being challenged by the dreaded warrior Jakargax of the Zarkon Empire in one-on-one combat for control of their quadrant. Tradition required a champion of great savagery. Butch's résumé, especially the bit about peeling skin, was seen not as culinary flair but as battle-hardened brutality. They offered incentives: a palace with a chocolate fountain, unlimited garlic bread, piles of gemstones, and the hand of one of the king's daughters. Butch was polite, even honored, but still mostly confused. "Listen," he said, "I'm really not qualified to—" "Would you prefer a warm-up bout?" the vizier asked. "Perhaps a duel against our spice minister?" Butch quickly backtracked. No need. He was assigned luxurious quarters that smelled faintly of cinnamon toast and strategy. Butch wandered into an open kitchen that rivaled the best Earth culinary labs. There were glowing purple herbs, anti-gravity skillets, and a spice rack organized by mood. He got to work. As Butch cooked, the palace staff gathered to watch. He flambéed with flair. He julienned with abandon. He whipped up crepes that made one diplomat cry nostalgic tears for a childhood he didn't remember having. Butch was beginning to earn the title of hero, not for violence, but for his cuisine. Chapter 4. Cooking Up a Strategy. Butch stood alone in the alien kitchen, surrounded by ingredients that hissed, pulsed, or occasionally quoted existential philosophers in faint tones. Despite the surreal surroundings, it was the most peace he'd known in months. The kitchen was magnificent. Hovering cutting boards, sentient spatulas, some judgmental, a pantry that doubled as a transporter, and a spice cabinet organized by emotional intensity. Butch found himself smiling. He may not have asked to be abducted, but this was the kind of cooking environment he could conquer. He began experimenting. First came the nebula noodles, tossed with glowing herbs that tingled on the tongue. Then a zero-G crater cake that levitated slightly when chilled. The palace staff watched, slack-jawed, as Butch pirouetted between ingredients, flambéed with grace and plated with quiet reverence. Butch was turning into a legend, not for brutality, but for his mastery of mouthfeel. But then came the moment. A diplomat named Zorn accidentally sneezed near a salad prepared with a drizzle of imported earth olive oil and collapsed. Instant paralysis. Panic spread through the kitchen faster than a flame in grease. "What was that?" screamed the council's head of allergen protocol, a creature shaped like dread. Butch, puzzled, held up the bottle. "Olive oil, extra virgin, good stuff." The staff recoiled as if he'd brandished a cursed relic. It turned out Shilmaxians had a species-wide weakness. Olive oil acted as a neurorespiratory disruptor, like a glittery poison. Butch held the bottle in both hands, staring at its golden surface like he'd been handed the Grail. His mind raced. The battle was only days away. His opponent, a giant tattooed weapon factory known as Kragax the Pulverizer, whose hobbies included duel-based genocide and bench-pressing small planets. How could a chef stand against that? Butch looked down at the bottle. Then he looked at himself. Then he slowly, thoughtfully, rolled up his sleeves. Chapter 5. Battle Royale with Extra Virgin Drama. The stadium loomed like a colossal colander, porous, gleaming, and teeming with anticipation. Tens of thousands of Shilmaxians had gathered to witness the duel. It wasn't just tradition. It was spectacle. A single fight to decide the fate of an entire region of space. Vendors hawked star churros. Children waved flags depicting Butch mid-peel, wielding a spatula like a sword. The announcer's voice boomed, "Let the battle of claim commence." On this side, our defender, human, slicer, chef of justice, Butch Connors. Butch emerged from the fighter's tunnel, shirtless, his body glistening like a glazed ham, because he had marinated himself in olive oil from head to toe. Every inch shone. He walked slowly, deliberately, the light catching his slick frame and turning him into a radiant, walking biohazard. Across the arena towered his opponent, Kragax the Pulverizer, a beastly slab of muscle with scars like road maps and tattoos for every life he'd ended. He wielded a sword the size of a hover bus. His entrance was accompanied by screaming thunder and a chorus of goats. No one was sure why. Butch had no weapon, just oil, confidence, and the memory of a perfectly folded crepe. The referee, a levitating puffball wearing a tie, gave the signal. Kragax roared and charged, his blade slicing through the air with the sound of galaxies cracking. Butch sidestepped, narrow as a whisper. He ducked low. He spun. Olive oil flew like glitter in a disco. Kragax, confused but relentless, tried again. Butch leapt into a bear hug. There was a pause, then coughing, a wheeze, gurgling. Kragax staggered back, clawing at his throat. His eyes bulged, his knees buckled. Then, poof, the hulking warrior collapsed into a cloud of dry dust. The stadium was dead silent, then erupted. Cheers shook the heavens. Counselors wept openly. One poet began composing an ode titled The Glistened Grip. Fireworks shaped like ladles filled the sky. Butch bowed, olive oil still dripping, as history wrote itself in astonishment. Chapter 6. Olive Oil and Oaths. The celebratory feast lasted 17 cycles. By the end of it, 3 palace fountains had been converted to fountains of gravy, and one ambassador was still stuck to the ceiling from an overzealous crepe toss. Butch Connors, glistening from residual oil and newfound fame, stood before the High Council wearing a ceremonial sash made entirely of dried basil leaves. He had become a symbol, not just of triumph, but of transformation. The tales of his victory had gone viral across 6 galaxies. Merchants were already selling mini Butch action figures, complete with mini olive oil bottles. "Champion Connors," intoned the Grand Vizier, "it is time to claim your prize." A procession began. First came the deed to a palace, a sprawling structure shaped like a pressure cooker, filled with sentient furniture and a fully stocked pantry that restocked itself with a sneeze. Then came the trove of riches, which included gems that sang sea shanties and a meat slicer blessed by the gods of brisket. Finally came the brides. 3 daughters of the king floated forward. The first was a sentient vapor named Bliss Mist, whose voice echoed like a love song in a cave. The second was Princess Kryn, a luminous fungus with emotional intelligence and interpretive dance skills. The third was a cube named Thaldra, who glowed blue and had already picked out their curtains. Butch stared politely. "I'm flattered," he said. "Really? But I'm kind of married to my job." The daughters took it well. Thaldra blinked solemnly and whispered, "We shall always remain inside your metadata." The crowd roared with approval. Butch had not only won the battle, he'd preserved the sanctity of personal choice. As Butch stepped into his new palace, the Galactic news chattered about possible invitations to interstellar culinary diplomacy, alliances forged through flavor, and the newest rumor that Butch Connors had single-handedly shifted the tides of galactic politics, using nothing but olive oil and heart. Chapter 7. The Hero Nobody Saw Coming. Back aboard the Frisbin Core liner, Executive Chef Dulgon barked orders with his usual disdain, until a junior officer timidly held up a holo feed featuring Butch Connors, titled The Olive Warrior. The footage showed Butch, shirtless and glistening, bear-hugging an alien titan into a coughing fit, complete with dramatic commentary and culinary overlays. Dulgon blinked, then blinked again. His croaking insult stalled in his throat, replaced with a gulp of existential dread. The kitchen staff whispered reverently about the guy who won a war with vinaigrette. Some began peeling vegetables with newfound reverence. As the legend of Butch spread across systems, He became more than just a chef. He became a symbol for underdogs, for overlooked sidekicks, for anyone who'd ever been stuck cleaning squid fritters while dreaming of greatness. He never flaunted his fame. He returned to cooking, now with a fleet of assistants, a palace pantry, and a pan that whispered motivational quotes. He never fought again, except in culinary competitions so fierce even the judges cried vinaigrette. When asked about the battle, Butch always said, "I just did what I do best." And somewhere in his palace, framed in olive wood, hung the original recipe for crepes, unburnt, unforgotten, undeniably heroic. The end. Please like and subscribe.